Okay, well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's really great to see all these faces on the screen. We are going to dive right in because there's a lot of good info and great questions to get through. Thank you for joining us today on this Intimacy Coordinator training info session. We've allotted about 1 hour for a panel discussion and Q&A. The New Mexico Film Office announced this program a few weeks ago. We're really proud of it. This is something that's incredibly important to us at the Film Office and for the film industry in New Mexico. It's part of our goal to create an end-to-end safe film and TV production ecosystem in New Mexico. And thus we are partnering with Intimacy Professionals Association, IPA, Intimacy Coordinator Training Program taught by Amanda Blumenthal, who has joined us today, in order to prepare individuals in New Mexico's film and television industry to work as an intimacy coordinator in full-length feature film and television productions upon completion of this training. This industry role really came out of and was born of the Me Too movement. It's a really thrilling and exciting career and role. Intimacy coordinators are a critical component, again, in creating more safe, inclusive, and collaborative sets. We have a wonderful panel, and I can't wait to dive in about the details and the importance of this role and why we are partnering to get some New Mexicans here trained on the ground. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce Frances Lee Mccain, our moderator today. Frances has served on the New Mexico SAG-AFTRA board for 6 years, and she's been a member of the union or of the Guild for 50. She studied at the Royal Central College in London before beginning a long and varied career in film, television, and theater. And Frances is best known for her featured roles in iconic films and some of my favorites, Gremlins, Back to the Future, Footloose, among others, and many starring roles in television. In New Mexico, Frances has been seen in recurring roles on Preacher and The Girlfriend Experience, and has appeared in a variety of film and television projects, including Better Call Saul. I saw you as the judge just the other night, and it was great. Frances has taught for many years as a core faculty member of the American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco, where she was also a member of the acting community. We adore Frances. She's a fantastic moderator and actress. And thank you, welcome. It's all yours, Frances.
Very kind, and I appreciate your sweet words. Thank you, Amanda. I'm really honored to be here, and I'm thrilled to be introducing this panel. I think this is such important work. I'm really proud of the union for getting behind it and helping to bring it to the kind of prominence it deserves. So without further ado, we are really honored to have with us today Amanda Blumenthal. Amanda is the founder of Intimacy Professionals Association. She's a global leader in the training and certification of intimacy coordinators. IPA also has an agency branch that represents intimacy professionals, including intimacy coordinators, trans consultants, and gender and sexuality consultants with expertise in subjects such as BDSM, kink, LGBTQIA, and plus topics, including non-binary and gender non-conforming identities and other areas. Amanda is an experienced intimacy professional and a sought-after presenter on the topic of intimacy coordination. She has spoken at Women in Film, Film Independent, American Film Market, Association of Film Commissioners International, Women's Production Society, many more. And she is a leader in the SAG-AFTRA joint initiative with intimacy coordinators to create standards and protocols for intimacy coordination work. And she has consulted with the Producers Guild of America on developing materials for their Independent Production Safety Initiative program. And she was a contributor to the Time's Up Guide to Working in Entertainment. Amanda, it is really wonderful to have you with us. I don't think we could have found anyone with more experience and a more intimate history of intimacy. So thanks.
Happy to be here.
And next we have Teresa Jones. Teresa is a New Mexico-based intimacy coordinator and actor. And as a former Army medic, forensic scientist, birth doula, and childbirth educator, she has accumulated a wealth of experience and knowledge in occupational health and safety, consent culture promotion, reproductive justice, advocacy, sexual violence and intimate partner violence, expert testimony, and confidentiality. And having been involved in reproductive justice and advocacy work since 2014, and being bisexual, polyamorous, and kinky herself, Teresa has developed a deep awareness of and is committed to continuing education in trauma awareness, LGBTQIA plus issues, ethical non-monogamy, and BDSM. She is a member of New Mexico Women in Film, the National Coalition for Sexual Freedom, and has served as an advocate in film and television for pregnant and minor actors. Teresa believes that authentic representation of the vast landscape of birthing options, sexuality, gender expression, and relationship styles, from birth to first kisses to bondage, is an important part of good storytelling and can have an enormously positive impact on frequently misrepresented and stereotyped communities, as well as a society at large. Thank you, Teresa. It's a wonderful background that you bring to this work and to us. And finally, I'm reading this verbatim because I don't want to miss out anything about these wonderful women and the work they do. So with us again is Christine Mchugh, who is also based in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And she brings to her intimacy coordinator position a lifetime of work as an acting and improv teacher and corporate trainer. Additionally, she has served as support staff for Human Awareness Institute workshops on love, sex, and intimacy, and trained as a life coach with Coaches Training Institute and the work of Byron Katie. Christine spent 5 years as president of the New Mexico chapter of Women in Film, which is an organization dedicated to supporting women working in all aspects of the film industry in New Mexico through networking, mentorship, and education. And during her time leading NIMWIF, as we say, she produced multiple events dealing with gender inequity as experienced by women in all sectors of the industry. And she is a deft communicator dedicated to compassionate collaboration that leads to clarity. She approaches her work as an intimacy coordinator as a professional opportunity to facilitate safety for everyone's empowerment and service to the story. So that's our panel. I'm delighted to have them here with us and to be moderating this wonderful work. So let me see if I can find my next position, because Amanda, I'm going to start with you. We're just going to dive right in to the meat and potatoes. And I'm going to ask you, what is an intimacy coordinator and what do they do?
Yeah, absolutely. So we can start with the basics. So essentially, the role of an intimacy coordinator is to help create a safer environment on set for performers whenever they're involved in scenes related to nudity, simulated sex, other types of intimate content. There's a wide variety of intimacy that goes beyond just nudity and simulated sex. And part of that is also helping to tell the director's creative vision. So intimacy coordinators walk this, balance between making sure the performers feel safe while also being there to help aid a director in terms of them trying to tell the story that we're trying to bring to life. And so there's a couple of key roles that an intimacy coordinator plays. First and foremost, we're advocates for the performers. This can include LGBTQIA plus cast members. We're also there to serve as a liaison between actors and production, which helps with interrupting the power dynamic that is often present between performers and producers or performers and directors. We're also there to help ensure that closed set protocols, other types of safety protocols are being enforced on set. Any kind of union guidelines related to intimacy work are being followed, the performers' nudity riders are being obeyed, things of that nature. And we're also able to help with choreography and with movement coaching and things like that, if that's something that the director is interested in collaborating with us on.
And so what is the importance of the intimacy coordinator actually being on set as opposed to just being in rehearsals or in consultation with actors and directors? What's the importance of them being actually on set?
Yeah, I think this is a really interesting question because especially with COVID, there have been productions that are like, can't you just prep the scene remotely and then not show up on set and things like that? And it's so incredibly important that the intimacy coordinator is able to properly prep the scene, is able to be there during rehearsal if there are rehearsals, and then is also able to be there on set. And the reason is because things change. Things change all the time in film and television, and you can't always anticipate what's going to be happening on the day. And the other piece of it is that performers are allowed to change their mind at any time. And so a performer could get to set, feeling relatively confident. And then as they start to shoot a scene, something happens. They no longer feel safe. They no longer feel like they want to continue doing whatever is happening. And so it's incredibly important that the intimacy coordinator is there if this is a performer who doesn't necessarily feel comfortable speaking to the director or an AD or producer or something like that, and instead feels more comfortable talking to the intimacy coordinator about, I'm no longer feeling safe. What are my options? And so you have to have that person on the ground, and there's really no substitute for it.
Yeah, that's a wonderful point. I'm also wondering, I know that there have been roles similar to this, both in theater and television and film in the past, but nothing quite so organized and codified. And I'm wondering, how did this particular role come to be?
Yeah, so I think, in the very short history of intimacy coordinators, the role only existed for about 3 years or so in its current form.
Yeah.
There were people here and there doing similar things, but as it is now, it's been about 3 years. So since 2017, 2018. And I think, the hashtag Me Too movement is part of what really created an environment in which this role was able to come about, because there was so much awareness that was raised around the issues that performers were facing on set when it came to doing intimate scenes and facing harassment and things like that. And I think we really do have to give a lot of credit to the people who are doing intimacy director work in the theater sector, which is something that had been happening, for a while before intimacy coordination came about. And it's because of the groundwork that was laid through that process that we were able to then adapt that process to film and television. And there are significant differences and important differences, because film and television is a very different medium from theater. But that's where the roots of the job originally come from.
Right. And what is the Intimacy Professionals Association, and what does it do?
Yeah, so Intimacy Professionals Association, which we refer to as just IPA, is the organization that I started a couple years ago. I was the first intimacy coordinator in Los Angeles, and it became very clear to me very quickly that we needed more people doing this work, and I was the only person for probably about 8 months or so, and I was just getting so many calls from shows looking for intimacy coordinators. I was like,
Hmm.
should probably start training people. and and so it was one of these things where it's like, it started as like me and three other people at my kitchen table. It's just like starting to figure it out and like developing curriculum and basically creating a training program, and it's evolved incredibly over the last couple of years to the point where we have now this 16-week very robust training program. And it also became, clear to me that there were issues with representation on screen and things like that. And a lot of productions were telling me, oh, we want to hire a consultant, but we don't know where to find one. And so that's where the gender and sexuality consultant piece of the organization comes in. And then it became clear at a certain point that a lot of people were like, I would like to find an agent, but no one's representing intimacy coordinators. And we were like, we can do that at IPA. So we created the agency branch. And so a lot of the organization has just been born of seeing a need in the market and then filling it. And I think, and we've had just such an amazing response from the film and television community. And it's funny to look back now in hindsight, because I'm like, I had no business training people having only done the job for a year or so. I was around, I think, when we started training, but it was such a different landscape back then because no one had really done the job and we were all figuring it out. And it's now so different because we have standards and practices and protocols and things like that that are in place, and employers expect a certain level of professionalism with the role because it's so well established, and we have these standards with SAG-AFTRA and things like that. And so I think it's always important to remind people of the landscape now versus then is very different.
Well, clearly the fact that it has proliferated to such an extent over such a short amount of time speaks to how necessary it really is. And I've read some wonderful testimonials by actors and directors about how they'll never work without this again, because it has made such a difference to them. So tell me more about the training itself. What is the training format like? What does an intimacy coordinator need in terms of training?
Yeah, so one of the things we've actually been working with SAG-AFTRA on is establishing what exactly are the training requirements and guidelines and things like that. In January of 2020, we released a joint document, and by we, I mean the intimacy coordinator community, released a joint document with the union that lists all the different areas of expertise and training that an IC has or should have. And so that's available on the union website. You can look up SAG-AFTRA standards and protocols for the use of intimacy coordinators, and it'll pop right up in Google. But in terms of the training through IPA, we follow all of SAG-AFTRA's guidelines, and we also do more, just to give people an understanding of what it is that we cover. We go over, the basics of consent, boundaries, power dynamics, things like that. We talk about sexual harassment. What is it? How do you handle it? We go through all the different pieces of the intimacy coordinator process. So what is the prep process? What is the shoot process? What could you expect during post-production, and how might this role interface with that side of producing? We talk about closed set protocols, nudity riders, which is a really, really big piece of this work. I think a lot of people underestimate just how much paperwork and contracts there is to understand, which are a very, very specific skill set, and it's understanding legal English and things like that. And so it takes a bit of understanding and training. We also go over, how does this role interface with all of the different departments? Because I think the coordinator piece of the title really speaks to the fact that we work with multiple different departments. We're coordinating between them. And so, we're working with production, we're working with the AD team, we're working with hair, makeup, costumes, props. We interface with many, many different departments. One also has to have a pretty good understanding of cinematography, because you have to be able to have an informed conversation with your director about how they're planning on shooting a scene, because that's going to inform what are we going to be seeing on camera, which you need to know in order to have conversations with performers and then work on their nudity riders. So we also cover things around sensitivity, that relates to gender and sexuality. We also, in our program, cover race and power, which is a really important piece of this work. There's a lot of nuance to understand. And we spend quite a bit of time talking about communication, conflict negotiation, things of that nature, because so much of this work also is just knowing how to communicate with people, especially when people get triggered. When there's sensitive material. Sexuality is a very sensitive topic for a lot of people, because even though we're dealing with it in a professional context, it can still feel very personal for many people. People bring their own discomfort with sexuality to this work, and that's something that has to be navigated. So that's kind of just a a general idea of some of the things that we cover in training. There's a lot of stuff, but
yeah, can you tell me a little bit about the time frame, sort of the format, if that's appropriate? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for the reminder. So we do, in my training program, we do 16 weeks. We meet one day a week for 4 hours each weekend. And then at the very end, we have a 2-day intensive in-person choreography workshop, obviously pending COVID. And so um, I have it basically set up like a college course. So anyone who likes school will like the setup of my program is what I like to say. Because there is a reading list. I give quizzes most weeks to make sure that, you know, people are taking in the material, seeing where there might be any issues with retention and understanding. We also have a midterm, we have a final exam. We do a readiness to work review at the end to make sure that people have hit certain competencies and soft skills, because a lot of this work isn't just memorizing, you know, contracts and things like that. It's also having certain soft skills, so that you can go out there and effectively interface with all the different people you need to on set.
Yeah.
So that's
So it's basically a 4-month program
Mhm.
of a very intense nature. And we will get to, we'll ask Christine and Teresa in a little bit about how they actually experience the program, but we've got a lot of material to get through. So let's see what else what other lovely questions do we have here? You talked about interfacing with the different departments and how supportive SAG-AFTRA has been with the work of intimacy coordinators. Can you tell us a little more about the collaboration that's been going on, or do you think you covered that pretty well? I think you probably did, and you referred people to the website, to SAG-AFTRA website.
Yeah, the other thing I would mention is that you know, there's the training guidelines are there, but there's also, you know, SAG-AFTRA has laid out a process, you know, and it's not a very detailed process, because one of the things that we all agreed on when we were creating the guidelines is that there are different ways that people work. And so it's really important to recognize that. And so the process that's laid out there is like the bare bones. It's like the minimum of the things that the
Yeah.
intimacy coordinator should do, but that's not the end all be all of what an IC does. And I think it's important to recognize that. And we wanted to build in some flexibility to the process as well, which is why it's minimal.
Sure, that's great. Can you speak a little bit about what you look for in an IC applicant?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of what I'm looking for is the right personality fit.
Mhm.
There's a certain temperament that I'm looking for. You know, it's important that someone is able to be assertive, someone who is able to set clear boundaries, someone who's able to communicate very clearly, very effectively, someone who, you know, has a little bit of gravitas, because as intimacy coordinators, we often get put in positions where you're telling a director or a producer that they can't do something.
Yeah.
And that is a very difficult position to be in. And so if you don't feel confident in being able to like stand in front of that person and say, we can't do this, then that's going to be a really big issue. And but the other thing is that there's a lot of nuance to that. There's a lot of nuance to understanding when is it that you set that hard boundary, or are there other things that we can discuss as possibilities to work around this. And so there's, you know, it's understanding all those key things are kind of what I'm looking for. And we do case studies and interviews, so I can kind of get into that with people.
Yeah. I just wanted to mention, because I looked at your website earlier, and you have a wonderful collection of articles that have been written, a lot of terrific resources. I would really encourage everyone to go to Amanda's website and look under the, well, look at it all, but particularly look at the press clippings that she has put up there, because it's full of wonderful information. Okay, let's get to one of the nitty-gritty questions. What is the pay range for an IC?
Yeah, so right now, we liken the pay range to stunt coordinators. So basically, across the industry, all the working ICs, we all stay above SAG-AFTRA's scale for stunt coordinators. I think it changes every couple of years, you know, because there's like a 2% increase or something like that. The number right now is $1,030 for an 8-hour day. Is
And
the
I'm
minimum.
assuming, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's just the minimum. Lots of people
Okay.
work above that. Yeah.
That's what I was going to ask about. And
Yeah.
that's why it's important to have agency representation.
It's so incredibly important that we all maintain the standard,
Mhm.
because right now, since we're not represented, technically people can charge whatever they want. But the thing is, and what we all have to keep in mind, is that we're playing the long-term game. And so taking a low rate right now that undercuts everyone else may seem like a good idea to get credits and things like that, but it's actually setting us up to be in a position later where everyone across the board is going to be paid less and less and less. And so it's so incredibly important that we keep our rate at a certain standard, or this job is not going to be sustainable. And I think, most people agree, being compensated fairly for your work is an incredibly important piece. And so, we're working towards eventually becoming part of SAG-AFTRA. That's the goal. That's what we're hoping for.
Oh, I did not know that. That's good to know. Yeah.
And once that happens, most
Mhm.
likely
Right.
it'll be a position of, there'll be set minimums, and so we won't have to worry about that. But until we're able to join a union, undercutting of rates and things like that is a really big concern for the sustainability of this position.
That's
And
the issue, all right.
please don't do it, y'all. Please don't do it.
Don't work off the card, as we say. Now, the program that we're speaking about is, and I don't know, this might be a question for you, Amber, I'm not sure, but is it just for New Mexicans, or can folks outside of New Mexico apply?
Amanda, you can answer it. You
Yeah.
can take that.
Okay. Yeah, anyone can apply. You can literally apply from anywhere in the world. We have lots of international students. My last group of students was about 1/3 international. We had people in 7 different countries. And so, I encourage people from all over. Obviously be cognizant of the fact of wherever you live, does it have a film industry, and would you be able to get work? If you're applying from some small town in Idaho, I think you're going to have trouble. But if you live in a country or in a city that has a film industry, that's a much better place to be starting your career from. And so for people who are in New Mexico, you have access to this really unique opportunity through the New Mexico Film Office to help get funding to pay for your tuition. And that's only available to New Mexico residents.
Okay, that's the important part of that particular question for this particular audience, I think. I think it's time to turn to Christine and Teresa, and I'm going to ask a question that I'd like each of you to answer in your own way. What made you interested in becoming ICs?
I guess I'll go first. As the president of New Mexico Women in Film, I was pretty plugged into what was happening in the industry, and my passion project as the president was doing a lot of work around gender parity, gender justice, gender equity for hiring, and at the same time, coincidentally, and I think very synchronistically, the Harvey Weinstein scandal broke, and the idea of this terrible power disparity and the abuse that was happening within our industry came to the forefront of popular culture. And I'm a firm believer that wherever goes the industry, the film industry, goes popular culture, because we do kind of craft the narrative for how we understand things. I don't consider it to be coincidental that that kind of scandal would have happened coming out of our industry as the highest profile part of things. So how we were going to respond to it was just kind of everything. It really determined a lot about, I think, what our country stood for ethically. And luckily, #MeToo and Time's Up came out of that. And then at the same time, I was watching this role develop in the film industry. Primarily, I first got wind of it through the production of the HBO series The Deuce with Emily Mead, who came out and said basically, look, I'm shooting sex scenes all the time, and there are people who are there on set to ensure safety whenever there's any kind of physical danger for adults and for children and even for animals. Why is there no one there to be an advocate for me when I'm shooting scenes of serious emotional risk? And that's where it kind of came out of, from what I understand things. And that's where it drew my attention, because I thought, oh my gosh, this is kind of where all of my stuff coalesces. My skills, my experience, my knowledge, and my passion all come together in this role. And because I was plugged into what was happening in the film industry, I was kind of on the, one of the first to know about it. So I started to explore being involved in another program. That didn't work out. I was able to take advantage of this one, but I'm really looking forward to it because of the amount of, I used to teach, besides teaching acting, and I used to teach dealing with difficult conversations, and really being able to walk that fine line of power disparity situations, and being able to mitigate and be kind of a mediator in that circumstance. This is what I get to do with actors, and I could hardly be happier about it. And also, having been on the other side of the camera as a director, I understand what it means to want to get the best out of your company, to really be able to interface with talent at their most vulnerable, so you are bringing the best of all of them to bear on the story. And that's what I'm excited about being able to do.
That's great. Teresa, how about you?
Yeah, so my interest in the field actually sort of just jumped into my lap a couple of years ago when, as it was a sort of a different safety concern that brought it up. I started in film as an actor, and working on a lot of independent productions and stuff. I was being asked to fall down and hit people a lot, and I had no stunt training. And I thought, well, maybe I'd better get some training. So one, I know when and how to say no, and two, or ask for a stunt coordinator, or two, how to do it myself. So I went to stunt camp in Canada, in Banff, Alberta, to the Patty Korean International Workshop there, which is like a week-long international congregation of stunt performers, experts, stage combatants, and a training. And they had brought in Alicia Rodas and Rachel Flesher, who were two of the other very early intimacy coordinators and intimacy directors in the theater world as well, to sort of introduce the community to this very new discipline. And it was just mind-blowing how many parallels it had with a lot of my background, having, been in forensics and specializing in sexual assault cases and in birth work, where, the bulk of that is really navigating difficult power dynamics and advocating for informed consent. And I'd always felt a little guilty about having left those professions in favor of pursuing my career in film, which was something I didn't do till much later in life, just because I didn't live in a place that had an industry until I moved here in 2010. And so, I had asked them, I said, have you ever been asked to choreograph a birth, or do you ever work with doulas? And at the time they said, we haven't yet, but we really, really want to. Let's talk more. Since then, just the timing had never really lined up in terms of the training programs that had been, that were being offered. And a lot of them required traveling for an extended period of time to a very distant place. And I have 2 young children. And so that was, that was a big ask for me. And so when Amanda's program came up and it was, mostly online, I had to jump on it. I mean, it was such a great opportunity. And with COVID happening, and this program for us, it started very early in the first COVID shutdown. I thought, well, this will give me something to do. And I'll be ready to hit the ground running when all the restrictions are lifted. And so yeah, and of course I was also really drawn to Amanda's experience. She's got a really impressive list of credits. And I really love that she has a lot of consultants and, people that advocate on trans issues and sex workers and people that I feel like are really both underrepresented and very badly misrepresented often in film and television. And so it's just such an important thing that she's included consultants.
I'm curious to know too, what both of you think, and I'll, Teresa, you can answer this first. Do you feel that this training is something that a person with a full-time job could do?
The training, yes.
Okay.
The job, well, that could be tricky. The film industry, as you know, tends to fly by the seat of its pants quite a bit, and they often don't. And you know, it's true in casting as well, where they don't really hire until very close to the date that you're expected to work. So giving several weeks notice to your employer is often not feasible. You don't know your schedule usually, sometimes until the night before. And so having a full-time job, unless you've got a lot of flexibility, that's going to be a tough sell for your current employer.
You think you agree with that, Christine?
Yeah, completely. And as far as the training time, what Amanda said about it being like a college class, that's how it's structured, is spot on. It was, there was a lot of reading, and it was fantastic reading. I couldn't imagine a more profound pursuit to be engaged in during this COVID time than this training, because it just hit all of the really core issues that you have time to work on and think about as the rest of your life kind of drops away, you know, during this time. But to be able to work on sensitivity around gender marginalization and trans issues, race and power, trauma, enormously fulfilling, deep work, not to mention the intense practice on communication skills. Always lots of role playing, lots of practice opportunities. So that was great, but it takes up your time for sure.
Amanda, what is a typical day or week like for an IC when they're actually working on set? Can you?
I would say
Is there
there's
such
no
a thing as typical?
there's no such thing.
That would
Just
be
'cause,
my guess, yeah.
yeah, you know, I mean, I think it's the same thing for actors and stunt performers and stunt coordinators and many people who work in positions in film and television that are often day player positions. And you know, obviously there's a lot of crew members who are there every day, and it's consistent until your show ends. And that's usually not the case for an intimacy coordinator, because there are actually very few shows that actually will carry you on a weekly contract for the entire run of show. Because the only time they would do that is if they have a lot of intimacy.
I see.
And so, you know, it varies. I mean, and the other thing is that the film industry is very cyclical. And so, you know, there's certain parts of the year where it gets really slow, and other parts where it really ramps up, you know, usually around August, September, like a lot of shooting starts. And then in January, there's usually a bit of a lull, and then there's like Sundance, and then after Sundance is when like stuff starts to pick up again. And so it's, you know, it's the freelancer life, and it, you know, work comes and goes, and it also sometimes depends on what cities have work and where the tax incentives are.
Oh, it's not
and
unlike being an actor in many ways.
yes, exactly. Yeah, if you're an actor, you will be very used to the rhythm.
Now, what about qualifications? Is it required to have a college education? Is that necessary? We have a lot of sort of working questions about this.
Sure.
Yeah, and so that's one, and then I'll give you the other one. You can answer them both at the same time. And what if someone isn't accepted the first time around? Can they apply again?
Yeah, so to talk to the education question, I've trained people anywhere from a high school degree to a PhD.
Okay.
So in terms of like education level, you know, if I think you're there, and because obviously there's lots of reasons why someone doesn't go to college.
Yeah.
And that doesn't necessarily mean you won't be a good advocate, you won't be able to understand contracts, you won't be able to do the job.
Right.
And so I don't think anyone should be discouraged from applying just because they don't have X degree. So I'll say that. And repeat the second question. I'm terrible at multiple questions.
If you applied and you weren't accepted, can
Thank
you
you.
apply again?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you applied before, you can absolutely apply again. The one thing that you should know is that if you are applying a second time, you will have a different interviewer. And the reason why we do this is so that you get to, you know, interface with someone different who may have a different opinion and may be able to advocate for you. And also, you know, applications change and things like that. And we just think that it's important that, you know, you get another chance.
Yeah. Great, thank you. This is wonderful. I think, Amber, I think I'd like to come back to you at this point. And why is this important, this particular position and program important in New Mexico at this time?
Yeah, so it's incredibly important. And again, this is something we're really proud of to bring to New Mexico because of the impact this role is already making on the industry. It's about advocating and creating more safe sets in New Mexico. And, you know, we want to be a leader in the industry. We want to tell the global industry that, hey, if you come to New Mexico, we have trained ICs here on the ground, trained by the amazing Amanda Blumenthal, ready to work. And we're highly supportive of this role. It's a high paying career that has a really bright future and has a positive impact on the community and all of the artists who work in the film industry. So we think it's critical, and we want to make sure we're ready for when things really start ramping up again. We have people to hit the ground running.
Are there scholarships available for this program here in New Mexico?
So for New Mexican applicants, this is what is so exciting, and thank you for asking that. For New Mexican participants who are selected for this program, we are utilizing some workforce development funds and are covering 60% of the tuition for New Mexican residents. So that's why, you know, we're really trying to get word out. Please apply if you're a New Mexican resident and if this is speaking to you today, because usually the tuition cost is quite a lot higher. With the funds coming in at 60%, the tuition comes in just over $4,000. And again, that's for this really robust program. So it's not per se a scholarship, but it's certainly tuition help.
Mm-hmm. So it's not an inexpensive program by any means, but it's also one that is supplying a particular standard of excellence that I would have to say is worth the money, however you can manage it.
Yeah, it's a great investment. Again, if this career is for a very special person with a wonderful blend of certain skills, and it's an investment that in yourself if it calls to you, and this is a great time to do it with that tuition help. So
yeah, that's a wonderful, wonderful program. Okay, I think, gee, this has been wonderful, and I think we need some time for Q&A from the folks who are here. Is that right?
we do have a little time for Q&A. We're going to wrap at 3. So I also, before we dive into that, I wanted to just say, if we can't get to all of your questions here on the Zoom, I see a lot coming in on the chat. Please email them to intimacycoordinator@gmail.com. We'll put that in the chat as well, but don't worry if we don't get to you today. Just please email those questions to intimacycoordinator@gmail.com. Francis, do you want to read off questions, or I can?
I don't see them, so
Okay.
I think I'd better leave it to you, but I just wanted to say what a rich time this has been. This has been so full of such great information. Thank you all so much for lending your time and your talents, and thanks for inviting me, Amber.
Thank you, Francis. And I do have some words at the end to thank all of you too. So thank you so far. So let's see, I'm seeing a question. Can you still act part-time while in this position?
Yes, absolutely. There are a number of intimacy coordinators who are also actors. I think acting is one of the jobs that actually lends itself best to also pursuing intimacy coordination, because they both have this very similar rhythm in terms of like day playing and things like that. And many actors are very familiar with the type of schedule that we work and stuff like that. And so the one thing I will say, I got a really interesting question recently about this. And someone asked me, is there a conflict of interest? And I said, I don't think there's a conflict of interest in terms of pursuing both of these careers. I think where there could be a conflict of interest is if you are working as the actor or an intimacy coordinator on a project and they ask you to do both those things. So like, let's say you're a lead and they're like, oh, can't you also intimacy coordinate this? that's a conflict of interest. So that's when it would be a problem, but otherwise I think it's fine.
That makes sense.
Can I add something to that as well?
Yeah, please.
Just being an actor myself, I would say that, generally with acting, your schedule is on a first come, first serve basis, which is sort of the same thing that it would be with an IC contract, by being mindful that if you are under contract, then you have to do that work that you're contracted to do. And so when you are, say, put on a weekly schedule or something, just make sure that you're informing your acting agents that you're not available during those times so that they're not submitting you for projects that are going to conflict. But so far it's been totally manageable.
Great. Another question that came in, is there such thing as too old to train to be an IC?
I would say no. One of the things that I think is so great about people who are older is that they bring a lot of life experience to this job. And that's just so incredibly invaluable. So, in IPA, we have people ranging from their 20s to their 60s. So I definitely would say don't not apply because you think you're too old.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you. Also, I'm going to summarize this, a group of questions here. You sort of addressed this because the industry is cyclical and it ebbs and flows. Certainly in New Mexico, we're a thriving industry and we're on great momentum. But how likely is it for you to get hired after the training? And you covered this, but let's cover it again. Do you get represented with your organization afterwards to help get connected to jobs, et cetera?
Yeah, so it's really hard to speak to likelihood of training or hiring after training just because we have no way of predicting what projects with intimacy are going to be where at what point, and where things are filming changes very frequently. Like I mentioned before, if you're in a large city like LA, New York, Atlanta, there's going to be more opportunities to work than there are in some smaller markets. And where the jobs are often fluctuates, but that doesn't mean there aren't going to be opportunities on independent films and things like that in other markets. There are people making films everywhere. So how tapped in you are to your particular market also will have a very big impact on how much work you're going to be able to do. I think there's a second question, right?
Are people who finish the training represented with you?
Oh, right. Yeah, so people who finish the training and complete all the requirements for certification are eligible for representation through the agency. It's completely optional. So if you go through the training and you decide you don't want an agent to rep you, or you don't want us to rep you, you have the option to go find another agent or just go it on your own. There are many people who work as ICs and just don't have agents. And so I would say about 70% of people choose to sign with the agency. Yeah.
I'm curious to know, just piggybacking on this question, because actors are able to go off and work in various markets. If you have representation or you have opportunities in other markets, does that apply for this as well?
You mean in terms of working in multiple markets?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, there's lots of people who, they're based in one city and there will be a project in some place where they just don't have a local intimacy coordinator. And so they end up, flying someone in. Like, for example, Hawaii has no local intimacy coordinators. So when there are projects there, they fly in people from Los Angeles usually. They could go further, but
We divulged that you just got back from 5 weeks in Hawaii.
I did. There's actually another project there now looking for an intimacy coordinator. So I'm like, I don't know if maybe it's a COVID thing, because like Hawaii is so strict about their protocols that everyone's like, let's shoot in Hawaii. But yeah, so also for whatever reason right now Pennsylvania has a lot of stuff shooting. So it, but like I said, it comes and goes, and different locations have more work at certain times than others. And then, the tax incentive stuff runs out and production moves somewhere else. So it's unpredictable, but there's stuff all over the US and abroad as well.
And I do want to say that, with the recent Netflix announcement, them really doubling down here, doubling their commitment. And Amanda, you can chime in. I know Netflix has been one of the front runners in utilizing and hiring intimacy coordinators on a bevy of shows. And of course, now right here in Albuquerque, we have the largest production hub of Netflix is in North America for 10 years minimum. So we thought that was a good fit too, because even though this industry does ebb and flow and it is cyclical, we do have these long-term film partners that are already utilizing ICs here, utilizing ICs on a lot of productions. And I know you've got Netflix credits, Amanda. So, so that's partly why we're doing this now. It really dovetails nicely into the recent developments. And we have time for a few more questions. I wanted to, there's two questions. I'm going to lump them into one. How many trainees will be accepted into the program as a whole? And is there a cap on that? Before I turn it to Amanda, I do want to say we will cover up to 3 New Mexican residents for that tuition help. So there will be 3 selected New Mexicans for the program, but Amanda, take it from there for the whole class.
Yeah, so the entire class is capped at 12 people. That includes in the entire world. So, so that's not just US people or North America people. That's like 12 people from everywhere that people apply from. And part of the reason why we do that is I'm the principal teacher for the program. We do bring in guest lecturers and things like that, but I teach over 80% of the programming. And so it's really important to me also to be able to give individual attention and mentorship to each of the people. And there's only so much time in the day. I also still do a bit of work as an IC and I run the organization. So we keep it capped so that I'm able to give people the attention that they need and deserve as they're training to do this job. And then part of it is also, it's not just once you finish the program, you're on your own. There's continued mentorship after that. And there's also a community of other people doing this work that you become a member of as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And what does the application fee cover? And when does the training start?
Training is currently scheduled to start, I believe it's the first Sunday, it might be the second Sunday in February. I believe it's February 7th.
Yeah.
Just look at my calendar. Yes, is the first Sunday, February 7th. Applications are due by January 10th. And the application fee covers all of the logistics and processing that go into our whole application process. For anyone who's already filled out an application, you'll notice it's rather extensive. There's a lot of reviewing that goes into it. We also do interviews for every single person who applies to the program because we think it's really important that everyone has the opportunity to present their best self. Some people, they may not come across well necessarily on a written application, but they're a fantastic candidate. And we want to get to know each of you before we make a decision about whether or not to accept or deny or waitlist someone from the program.
Yeah, great. It is very time intensive on your end. So I think that is a fair fee. It's a lot of time on Amanda's end. Let's see, do you have to be a member of SAG? And to answer another question along that right off the bat is, this is not a government job. This is a film industry job. Someone was asking, do you have to be a member of SAG? Is it a consultant? Are you, a full-time employee?
Yeah, I got this question. Yeah. So you do not have to be a SAG-AFTRA member to be an intimacy coordinator. It's currently, like I mentioned earlier, it's a non-union position. We work on non-union contracts. And so when you are hired by a production, you are hired as an employee of that production. You are not hired as an independent contractor or anything like that. If anyone ever offers you an independent contractor contract, if you're doing this work on your own, don't take it. That's bad. You need to be an employee because you have to be covered for workers' comp.
Good advice.
Red flag if they're trying to independent contractor you.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Let's see, when do interviews begin? I'm gonna just say applications close January 10th. January 10th, get your application by then. And when do interviews begin?
They started last week.
Okay. Great. How many applicants do you get on average? How competitive is this?
Yeah, our acceptance rate last time was about 30%. So, you know, it's in terms of this time around, it's going to be very competitive for people applying from New Mexico. We've gotten a lot of applications already, and like Amber mentioned, there's only 3 scholarships available, or up to 3. So if you're applying from New Mexico, it's going to be very, very competitive. I can tell you that. So.
Yeah, and you know, as we scale up our crew and all of our other industry professionals like ICs, you know, this hopefully will not be the only one that we partner with Amanda on to train up more people as demand increases. And we're gonna have to wrap up. Again, please send your questions to intimacycoordinator@gmail.com. Thank you so much, Frances, for moderating this today. You're a wonderful moderator. We're so happy to have you. Teresa and Christine, thank you so much for being here, taking your time, providing your insight, sharing your experience. And Amanda, you're amazing. We're so happy to work with you. Amanda and I have been in talks for some time now, and it's so thrilling to actually announce this and get it out there. So as a reminder, applications can be found at intimacyprofessionalassociation.com. Intimacy professionals, sorry,
Yeah,
plural,
with an S.
plural. Intimacyprofessionalsassociation.com, and they are due by January 10th. The program will begin February 7th, 2021. Send us more questions. Please apply if this calls you. And thank you so much for joining today. We really appreciate you being here.
And one other thing, there's also an info packet on our website on the training page. And so please read that. A lot of your questions will probably be answered in there. It's like 6 pages long, and there's like a ton of FAQ and stuff like that. And I saw there were some questions in the chat that would definitely be answered by the info packet. So check that out.
Wonderful. Thank you all.
Take
Thank
care,
you.
everyone. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much.